Okay, well, welcome everyone to this short webinar about recruiting trustees. I'm going to give a presentation for about 35, 40 minutes, and then we'll have some times for Q&A. This is being recorded, so the recording will make available to you afterwards. And also, I'll be sending you a copy of the presentation as well. And actually it will be going onto our website into the members zone. So actually it will be available to anyone to download who's a member of member of CAN. If you've got any questions as we go along, make a note of them or put them in the chat function, and I'll have a look when we get to the Q&A, so you don't forget your question later on. Okay, so this is a small charity week, if you didn't realize it. It happens every year, and we're putting this on as a bit of support to small charities. It actually finishes today, but if you go on the website, there's some other interesting stuff you might find useful. Small in this context is income of under $1 million, so I think that covers all of you. So you might find useful stuff there. Okay, getting trustees can sometimes feel like a real chore, almost like press scanning into it, but it doesn't have to be. There are some tips, but there is no magic answer. I'm not going to be able to pull the rabbit out of the hat, but hopefully this session will give you some ideas of how to improve your success rate at doing it. And a lot of the webinar is really based on this document produced by Getting On Board, called How to Recruit Trustees for Your Charity. A couple of years ago, they did a research program of looking at actually what worked with trustees, which was actually using open recruitment. So what I'm going to talk about really is an open recruitment process, really almost as if you were advertising for a paid position, because they found that it was very successful. But actually this publication is very good because it has downloadable templates of things like application forms, shortlisting forms, adverts, where to advertise, and so on. So when you get the presentation, there'll be a hyperlink straight to it, but you can just search for it on the web if you like. So it can seem very hard to recruit trustees. 75% of charities say it is difficult, but conversely, that does mean nearly a quarter of them say it isn't. So there are some things that we can think about to make a greater success. And some of that is sometimes thinking about actually, well, what are the barriers to people becoming trustees? And then we as charities trying to remove them or mitigate them or reduce them so that it becomes as easy as possible to become a trustee. So how do you find this magic person to become a trustee? How do you find them in that crowd? I bet for most of you, the tap on the shoulder is probably the most common way of doing it. Getting On Board, when they did their research, they found that 90% of trustee recruitment is done through word of mouth or through existing networks. But that does have a downside. The problem is a lack of diversity. Within your own membership, within your own networks, your own friendship groups, you tend to associate with people who are like you. So it'll be the same age, education, gender, class, and ideas and thoughts, and so on. So it's very easy for you to end up with groupthink, okay? And part of a charity board is to have sometimes a bit of grist of the mill, slightly different ideas, different viewpoints, so that you get creative decision making happening rather than the same old, same old. And of course, the other thing is that sometimes the tap on the shoulder can result on a trustee being a prisoner. They basically sort of didn't want to say no because they didn't want to upset their friend, their relative, and therefore end up being on a trustee board, almost being forced to, feeling that they've got to be there, and then can't find a way of getting out. And again, they're not going to be very they're not going to be very effective as a trustee. They won't really give the time and the energy. They'll probably do there just to sit at the meetings, nod their head, maybe sometimes nodding their head with their friend or the person who asked them. So again, they don't upset them afterwards. And so that doesn't work very well. They won't contribute. And sometimes they might get even a bit narked eventually and start to actually work against the organisation and its rules because they're not really that committed and signed up to it. The other thing, of course, is that bringing in new people, obviously, from outside your usual ambit can help in different ways. So they can help by bringing in sort of required skills, so that there might be skills outside of your usual networks that you really need within your charity. It can also obviously help share the workload. The more people on the board, the more people you can shift it around. And I'm sure you all recognize that maybe some of you are relying just on a couple of very key trustees who basically, do most of the work. And of course, you always have to recognize that some trustees can give more of their time than others. But the more people you have on your board, the more likely it is that you'll find people with enough time to give that. And of course, you want to bring in new people for succession planning. Who comes next to replace, whoever is vital within the organisation, and particularly that can be for key positions like maybe your chair and treasurer, maybe secretary, or somebody who is very key, brings in a key set of skills and expertise. Maybe they've got user experience, or it's around safeguarding or something like that. That's quite vital for your charity, that you're relying on that one individual to provide. And obviously, if they disappear off for whatever reason, then you're left with quite a vital gap. And the other thing I think all of us has got to start to be aware of is that it's about credibility. Quite a lot of funders now are looking and asking questions about boards and maybe how representative they are. So in terms of diversity, is becoming more and more an issue with some funders. Others might even be user voice. So if any of you, for instance, have done a lottery application recently, one thing they're very keen on is actually how do your beneficiaries, people the grants going to support and help, how do they have a voice? How do they have an effect or an impact on the project? Now, it might not have to be at board level, but I think it's going to become more and more of an issue. And this isn't just in the charity sector. This is a debate that's happening, within private sector boards. I think things you think about gender pay gap, for instance, and a number of women that are on boards is now becoming quite a thing. And very big companies now have to report on how many women are on the board of directors. And it's coming in around equality as well. So that thing's going to tumble down, and we don't want to be seen to be being behind, particularly because we usually have had a very good record in terms of diversity and equality issues. So all these people, what does that mean? Some surveys suggest actually that about you know, 1 in 5 British adults said that they would be interested in being a trustee. So in BCP, that would be about 60,000 people, and in Dorset, 70,000. So the question is, where are these people? I get all of you are saying, "Oh God, we can't get trustees for love or money." But 1 in 5, and even if only 10%, of those did that, that would be there's a large pool out there. So if many of those people, if they might have said 1 in 5 might have said that they would like to be a trustee because they don't want to see to be mean-spirited, but even if only 10% of them really did show an interest, that's still 13,000 people across Dorset, Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. But actually the other question they ask is they're sometimes not aware about who is looking for trustees and what it involves. So one of the barriers is, no one's asked me, obvious one, because they're not part of your network, for instance, and your usual places of advertising. There also is a bit of a barrier sometimes about not knowing what it involves, the legal responsibilities, the liabilities, but probably the biggest barrier is about time and timings. So sometimes people will get worried, maybe because they've known people have been trustees, that it can turn into a 24/7 job. So they want to know maybe, well, how many hours a week or how many hours a month am I going to have to give to this? But the other thing is around timings. So when are the meetings going to be? I guess historically, if you look at trustees, the majority of them are tending to be retirement age because they have more time on their hands. Not quite so now with grandparent care and stuff like that, but that's been the sort of research view. However, for working people and those with families and work, obviously, timings are quite precious. And therefore, I think sometimes boards might have to think about, when do we hold our meetings? If we want to attract people, maybe particularly those who are of working age and who have families, then actually weekday, daytime actually might restrict some people. So you might want to look at when you hold your meetings to do that. So other research has shown that the barriers are that the applications, the process is very slow. That basically, particularly if you end up saying that every decision has got to be made by the full board of trustees and they only meet monthly or even bi-monthly, someone expresses an interest and then they might get interviewed 2 months later, and then there's another process, and it might be 5 or 6 months before they're here. And sometimes a lot of people then just walk away. So it's exactly like a job interview process. Try and work out a process that is very, very quick. I'll talk about that a bit later on. And sometimes people don't get a response at all. That's a very common thing for volunteers. That people offer themselves out and they don't get a quick response. So, hit while the iron's hot, basically. So basically, it's only 10% of charities say they externally advertise. And actually only 54% even bother to do on their own website. So I think there is a bit of an issue for many charities that they don't think about doing open advertising. They try to keep it internal. Now I know some organizations do that because they basically want to check up on who's coming forward. But it's in the same way that if you are advertising for a paid position, the same could happen. But if you're using a robust recruitment process, you can hopefully weed out people who really may be applying for the wrong reasons, won't have the required skills and knowledge that you're looking for, and so on. So it is about, doing open advertising, but then following that up with some sort of robust formal process. and advertising can work. So the research that Getting on Board did was they worked with about 30 charities, and 80% of them said they struggled in the past. So that's a higher score than the national figure. Right at the beginning, I said that 74% of charities found it hard. So their cohort were higher, and they tended to be actually local small charities. So they weren't the big nationals, which that national figure might rely on. So looking at them, 80% of them struggled in the past, and using their sort of advertising. 3/4 of them actually then was successfully recruited. And just a few stats, 111 applications resulted in 55 new trustees. And just an example for Cannes, last year we identified the need that we wanted to find a trustee under 30 to balance our demographics. So we openly advertised, we used our website, we used our general emails, but we used LinkedIn and social media, and we used Indeed as well to advertise that we were looking for an under 30s. And we had about 8 applications, and interestingly enough, half of them weren't local. But we interviewed 3, and we appointed 1, but we also had somebody who was very, very good, and we would have wanted to appoint them as well. But actually we found another way they could be appointed, because in fact they were actually the trustee of a small local organization. So we've actually appointed them as a member, a representative trustee, as opposed to a co-opted one. So we got 2 trustees out of that. When asking someone to be a trustee, you really got to put yourself in their shoes, and what will be the benefit? What will be their motivation for becoming? And it's very often about it's about selling the benefits, not the features. What are they going to get out of it? And there is this big thing that 90% of trustees say they find it rewarding or very rewarding. And I think that's quite good to push out to people, that actually you will get something from it, i.e. this good warm feeling from being a trustee. But other research has shown that, the main reason that people become a trustee is they want to give something back, or they want to help make a difference. If you look at those 2 scores, that's quite high. But altruism is not the only motivator. So the next highest was about learning and developing skills, strategic planning, financial management, employment, etc. So 1/3 of people got that out of it, and that can be quite a good hook, particularly for younger trustees. So they can talk about career development. Being a trustee is around strategic management at the end of the day. So that actually, if people want to improve, and put on their CV that they've been involved in making, quite high level decisions, strategy development, then actually becoming a trustee can help with their career development. It can obviously help also people who want to move into a new sector. So if they want to, become a trustee of something involved with childcare, whereas their business is in retail, then that might be a way to sell on their CV. The other thing is that to use the skills you have. Some people in their paid work are not using all the skills that they got maybe from previous employment, or even from their education and learning. So actually they might feel, that I've got these skills, but it's not being used in my paid work. Well, you could do that as a charity trustee. And also it is important to talk about developing relationships. There is this whole thing about loneliness and isolation being an increasing issue, and actually becoming a charity trustee is a way of developing new relationships, particularly if you have recruited people from outside your usual networks. And I think the other thing always to talk about is it can be fun. I know it can sometimes, if you are a trustee, sometimes it's a bit of a nervousness laughter you have when things are not working quite well. But actually, I've been a trustee all my working life, and there have been downs, but there have been some really great times that I remember and have really enjoyed it. And it doesn't have to just be a chore. Okay, but before thinking about recruiting outside, you need to make sure that you as a trustee board are ready to welcome new people, and that you might be prepared to change and do things differently, and even the practicalities, like I said, such as times, the venue where you hold the meeting. What about paying expenses to trustees? It's perfectly legal to pay trustees for legitimate, reasonable expenses of attending or taking part as a trustee. Obviously, things like travel, but it can also be carer costs. And I know some trustees don't want to do that, but there could be a barrier for some trustees about those additional costs. And there is a little wheeze around trustee expenses that you could encourage your trustee to claim expenses and then to donate them back to the charity. And if they're a taxpayer, you can then get 25% back on gift aid. Perfectly legal. And I guess the other thing, of course, is if you're inviting new people in, and that's actually even with people within your network, actually, how do you behave as a board? Do you work well or do you behave badly? I think the first time somebody new is going to come into a meeting, if they feel it's not being well run, they can pick up a lot of bad vibes. They can see that there are cliques. They'll just vote with their feet. They'll say, I haven't got the time and the energy for this. So you need to make sure that your board is working well and effectively. And I know that's another complete ball game, but actually, if you don't feel that your board is working well, then it's probably not even worth thinking about trying to recruit new people in, because as I said, they will walk quite quickly. So these are the getting on board publication has these steps 1, and these steps. So the first one is about what do you need. So it's probably about thinking about what skills, knowledge gaps you have. Is there something particularly you want around the trustee board? Is there, what about diversity? It could be their background, their opinions. It could be their protected characteristics. So we regularly ask our trustee board members about things like, obviously, their gender, their age group, their sexuality, their racial origin, and also we ask them actually what groups, what volunteering community groups they are members of or have experience of. And then we compare that with the local demographics. So that was how we identified that we needed at least one person under 30. Last year, we also had identified that we needed more people from Black and minority ethnic communities. So we recruited somebody from one of our Black-led member groups, so that actually it more represented the local community, because we as CAN want to represent the local community, but also the local volunteering community sector. So we've still got a bit of a gap. So actually, one of the young trustees, because they were from a very small local neighbourhood community group, that was a gap we'd identified. We still have a gap about somebody from a community centre. And when you're doing that sort of gap analysis, don't just think about the now, maybe think about the next couple of years. Are there going to be challenges and opportunities coming up? And it'd be great to have somebody on the board. Now, the reason for doing this as well is that the experience of advertising for trustees is that the more specific you are, the more successful you will be. It's because a lot of people, when asked, why don't you become a trustee? They sometimes think, well, I'm not sure I've got anything to give. So if you're very upfront about the skills, experience, knowledge that you're looking for, then people can start to say, oh yeah, I've got that. And then they're more likely to apply. So the next thing is obviously think about your advert. Like with most adverts, you need to engage, be clear, think about your audience, who is it you're trying to get to and what will appeal to them. And key elements in an advert is, what you do, the difference you make. Focus on skills, experience, knowledge you need, the role of commitment, that it's not going to be 24/7, but be honest, don't underplay it, say, well, it'll only be a couple of hours a month, and then actually the expectation is sort of 6 or 7. And about, what to do next. And the next thing is around a recruitment pack or a personal contact where people can find out more and how to apply. So, prepare some sort of recruitment pack. So that would include things like I've already mentioned, time commitment, skills, experience, knowledge, what they need, what they bring from previous experience or qualifications. And at that point, put yourself in the shoes of someone and try and answer the questions they may have. When we send out the link to this recording and to the presentation, I'll attach CAN's recruitment pack that we use and send to our trustees. But again, the Getting on Board publication has a couple of very good examples. In fact, basically, I copied that for the CAN one. So. And the next thing, of course, is target your advertising. Put it where it's going to be seen. And if you're looking for particular gaps, then you might want to send them to particular things. Like, I guess, if people are looking for a treasurer, like I guess a lot of organizations will be doing, then it's about thinking where those sorts of people might have those skills. Now, the obvious thing is to look at sort of accountancy. So you look at the professional accountancy firms, but it might be people in the banking sector, for instance. To be a treasurer, you don't have to be a trained accountant. Generally, you need to be somebody who feels comfortable with dealing with figures. And there could be other people who have that, like I said, but people maybe who might be in the banking or in insurance world or whatever, that actually you might be able to pick in, might actually be able to appeal to. And the Getting on Board publication actually has some useful links to some national organisations for specialist professional bodies that you could make sure of. And don't forget your own networks. Although I said advertise out your networks, but I think it's about asking your networks to see if they know anyone. So cascade it outside of you and your members and your networks. Okay, so don't just say, do any of you want to be a trustee? Then actually ask, do any of you, or do you know someone else in your family or your friends or your work colleagues who might be interested? And particularly if you've got a recruitment pack that you can send out, then that's something they can pass around their friends, family, work colleagues. And trustees are volunteers, of course. So make sure that you use the your local volunteer centre. So in Cannes, we have the volunteering hub. If you operate in Dorset, or you want to maybe pick up some trustees perhaps across the border in Dorset, then use Volunteer Centre Dorset. So but then, of course, you've got to convert interest into applications. So get back to people, I said, is very important. People have said that they've sometimes not heard anything. So get back to them as soon as they express an interest, even if it's to tell them, thanks very much. Actually, you won't hear for another month because that's when our next meeting is. But, keep them engaged. And then, of course, try and limit the steps. I said before, that actually I would say try to avoid the whole trustee board being involved. Either delegate it to a single individual or to a subcommittee of the trustees, which then can get things done very quickly and then have a very quick set timeline. As I said, almost like a job recruitment, a deadline date, when you might be shortlisting, and then when there might be interviews and who might be on the interview panel. It's quite good to provide a named contact for those who are interested so that they know, who to contact to find out, well, what's happened about my application. And I think something I heard very recently that one charity has used is that they've actually organised a sort of an online Q&A session, so that actually as part of the recruitment cycle, they've advertised, well, come and join us for an hour and ask some questions for a Q&A about being a charity trustee. And then, of course, it's like a shortlist and interview. Now, this is, although I keep saying it's a bit like a job application, it can be a bit more informal. We have a few questions which explore people's motivation, what they feel they can bring to CAN as a trustee, what they would quite to look get out of it, what they think they'll be good at, and what things they won't be. But still having that sort of conversation across the table, and as I said, that could help you sift out the wheat from the chaff, but also maybe any alarm bells about whether you're a bit concerned about some people's motivation for becoming a trustee. And of course, the other thing to do is to allow them to suck it and see. So maybe to let them attend a board meeting before they really commit themselves to it, to see actually how it's run and see whether they feel that they can work within that structure. For instance, that's something we do at CAN. And then once you've chosen your people, you appoint them, but make sure you follow the rules in your constitution to the letter. It'll be very clear in there about actually how people are appointed. Some of you might have constitutions that say it has to happen at the AGM, which is a bit of a pain because you'll then might have to wait till that happens, or you've got to have a general meeting of your members. Hopefully, though, there might be clauses that allow the trustees to appoint trustees as a co-option, maybe to the next AGM. But actually make sure you follow exactly what it says in it. And it's quite interesting that, when the Charity Commission does get involved in charities that haven't been running very well, they quite often say it's part of the problem has been poor governance. And quite commonly, it's because it's not clear that the trustees were appointed legally. So, bit of a warning there. Okay, so when they do join the board, make sure you welcome them, you acknowledge them, but also think about induction. Too often, trustees are just left to sink or swim. Welcome to a board meeting, and that's the end of their induction, and then they're just expected to muddle along and learn as they do it. But quite often you'll find that those trustees quite often will start to walk away, not start attending, and won't come back. So, generally I would say, have a welcome pack of information so they get a good feel for how the charity operates. Maybe try a buddy system, which is what CAN has, where you have a system of experienced trustees with a new one for maybe 6 months or a year. So they've got a point of reference, before meetings and after meetings, where they can quite have a word saying, what does that all mean? Or what's the history behind that? Because obviously people won't feel they want to hold up a meeting by asking for all the past history. Also, it is a way of managing people who are like that. I think some people feel that sometimes when people become trustee that they take up a lot of the meeting by asking for back history. Well, if you've got a buddy system, you can emphasize that, you know, actually when people get an agenda, if they've got a short meeting with their buddy beforehand, they can get a bit of the background rather than take up time in the meeting to do so. If there's somebody who's very new to your charity, we'll arrange some, you know, arrange some times for them to come and visit what the charity does, so they get a good feel for what it does day to day, and attending any sort of open charity events and services. And then think about any training they might need. There's quite a lot of webinars, freebies around on the web, and CAN obviously runs trustee training. I did a session on Tuesday night this week. The next one's going to be in November, so a two-hour training session on being a charity trustee. Most boards, though, are male, pale, and stale. So welcoming is very important. And that when it comes to looking at diversity, encouraging anyone onto your board who's not typical of the others. The Charity Commission report in 2017 taken on trust revealed that 92% of trustees are white, against our national population is that the black population is 14%. So that figure should only really be about 86. 2/3 are male, and the average age is between 55 and 64. And since 2017, probably things haven't changed much. So I think just a few ideas here about perhaps attracting young trustees. So you know, I said most average age is around the sort of 60 mark, and maybe that's been because they have more time to give. But it's interesting that about 20% of volunteers are under 30. And as I said, trustees are a sort of special form of volunteers. And if you look at the BCP population, you know, the 17 to 24 is about 10% of the population, and in Dorset, this is just under 7. And it's about selling the benefits, I think, to the younger population. So there's going to be a benefit to you. So you'll get a young person's perspective and engagement. It'll be you investing in the future. You know, hopefully, if they come when they're 30, they'll be there for a good number of years, and they probably have certain skills that be benefit. A lot of people talk about digital know-how, making use of particular social media platforms, for instance. But I think it's more about that sort of what's happening in society and younger viewpoints that can help you either target your services better to perhaps a wider group of beneficiaries. So there are obviously ways of thinking about how to attract them. So probably advertising on social media and young people's groups. You know, as I say, promote the skills and experience that they can gain and maybe help with their future career. Make sure you've got good support and mentoring for them. I know that goes for all trustees, but it's been seen and shown that that's very effective for younger trustees, particularly younger, like under the 25 age range. And as I said, I'm talking about the timings of meetings, that younger trustees are more and more likely to be working and or with families, and therefore thinking about where your trustee meetings are going to be, and whether also maybe of using online stuff. And that's not just a younger thing. I think like many of us, CAN moved obviously during COVID to virtual meetings, and actually and most of our trustees are sort of probably over 40, and actually even post-COVID, we're probably going to alternate between online and physical meetings going forward because of the obvious same things. It's easier to fit into people's calendars, and there's less time taken up with travel and so on. And of course, you know, you need to be welcoming and acknowledged, or else people will walk. And then in terms of ethnic diversity, as I said, there's 14% is non-white in the UK, but only 8% of trustees. We have lower figures, slightly lower figures. In BCP, it's about 11.5% are non-white, and it's a very low 4%, just over 4% in Dorset. And therefore, there's a bit of I think that's a bit of an imperative for us to make sure our trustee boards are at least representative of the community. And of course, this is not sort of to blackwash your organization by showing that at least you've got some black trustees means that you're more likely to be welcoming to participants who aren't white. But I think it is an important statement to show that actually your board is diverse in that way. But it's quite interesting that research in the private sector has shown that that companies that are more ethnically diverse were more successful, 35% more successful than those that weren't diverse. Because they increase their competition, represent that part of the community, and bring a fresh pair of eyes. So if it works for the private sector, then it should work for us in the not-for-profit making. They obviously can bring their lived experience of discrimination in terms of actually, well, what are our processes and operations? In a way, are they indirectly discriminating? Are they creating barriers for people for that community, and therefore can make a difference? In terms of attracting, it's about using inclusive images and language, advertising, particularly in relevant networks. We are lucky that we have something like Dorset Race Equality Council that specifically works with Black and minority ethnic communities and organisations across BCP and Dorset. So actually getting an advert out to their network obviously will get to those groups and organisations. And in terms of, when you're doing your sort of recruitment, follow exactly the same way that you would, around good equal opportunity interviewing process. Basically, again, advertise about what they can bring. Many ethnically diverse communities don't see trusteeship as open to them, or that they have anything to contribute. And in fact, some will have had bad experience of putting themselves forward. So you need to sell those benefit and treat the shortlisting in that equal opportunities way. But again, there's this guide here. So when you get this presentation, there'll be a hyperlink to this guide here that's very good about giving examples of how to recruit successfully from ethnically diverse communities. And of course, again, make sure that you're welcoming and you're up for this change or not. In terms of ongoing help and advice, obviously there's CAN. So if you're in BCP, it's me, it's Avril Atkins if you're in Dorset. There's some hyperlinks here to the getting on board guide, and getting on board is very good for other stuff as well, particularly diversity. So their website has other material on there as well as that recruitment guide. NCVO, I've put the link there to their pages around recruiting trustees. And Reach, those of you who know Reach, they primarily work with ex-professionals, but they've got a specific website now around a recruiting cycle, but it very much follows this model, about identifying gaps, advertising, having an interview cycle, and then bringing on board and induction. And then the Young Trustees movement have got some good stuff around finding younger people, and Action for Trustee Racial Diversity, which is where this guide is from, has also got some good stuff as well. So hopefully the session has given you some ideas. We're always happy to give advice and support, and hope this will help you move to a more diverse, vibrant and effective committee. So over to you about any questions. I'm going to stop sharing. I don't think anything's in the chat. No. So if you've got a question, just unmute yourself and ask, since there's only a few of you. Oh, Sandra, are you asking something? You're muted. No, still can't hear you.
It's come up now.
Sorry,
the mute button wasn't. Mine's not actually a question. Mine's say how the CCP deals with recruitment of trustees once they come on board. What we actually have is we give a 6 months sort of feed-in line. So we take them on as a voluntary executive officer, hopefully for a specific role. We've got 2 or 3 we need at the moment, but with the proviso that we can take them on board as a trustee earlier if we wish to, but it gives both sides a chance to see how it's working. The other thing is with timings, we very much agree amongst ourselves as to what's suitable for the trustee board as a whole at the time. The other thing we do an induction process that's primarily for staff and volunteers, and that includes sort of governance and all sorts of different things. And we do handbooks for separate ones for volunteers and trustees. And we actually make the information available, the handbooks available to the trustees, but we also invite the trustees to the induction meetings and training meetings so that they pick up information that way.
Yep, sounds great. I think that reiterates an awful lot of stuff that I've talked about this morning, but that's putting it into practice. Great. Thanks very much, Sandra.
That's okay. The volunteer executive officer role might be suitable for other people. Just
so it's a sort of suck it and see for both sides, really, isn't it?
And also it means they're not having to wait for a trustee board of trustees to appoint them.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Sandra. Has anyone else got a comment or a question, observation? Karen.
Yeah, hi. For sake of the others, I'm a trustee at Colourworks Foundation. We're a reasonably small but hopefully growing local charity. And we had really good success in December 2020 for our recruitment drive. I think we had about 11 applications that were solid ones, and narrowed those down to about 6 interviews and appointed 3 from that. And I have a feeling that was perhaps the pandemic and everyone was feeling that they had more time and were more worthy. And we're recruiting again now because one of those 3 trustees didn't actually get very far, so we ended up with 2, and we've had 2 that we have left on the cycle, and we're really struggling this time. And I just wondered, Steve, if that was symptomatic, if that was a pattern that you were seeing at CAN.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think in the same way about volunteering generally, obviously during the pandemic, a lot of people had more time or more flexible because they were working from home, and therefore they could shift their hours around or whatever. So I think you're right. But I guess I would say it's more important. It's now even more important to review, your timing. So Sandra's saying, I was in a session yesterday where they said every time you have a new person appointed, you have that conversation about, well, what is the most suitable times, so that actually you don't just assume that people are happy to go along with 3 o'clock on a Wednesday, the third Wednesday in the month is to actually, but it is to have that direct question, so it's out there, and you have an open conversation rather than assuming everybody agrees unless they don't say anything.
Well, our problem is we're not actually getting the applications. We've got adverts on Simply Connect on the CAN and volunteering database, and we've got them on Reach. We've had 1 on Reach recently, and we're trying to avoid, we have got a few people in our own networks, and we're trying to avoid those for that very reason. We want younger and more diverse people. And we put up 2 trustees, one a very specific financial one and one a general one, and we're just not getting applications. I don't know what to do next, except change the advert completely, maybe.
Well, it might be. You know, you could always send me to have a look at. But I think the other thing to talk about is when you're advertising, is okay, yes, you can use Can, you can use Reach, but obviously those are networks where people are already interested about being a trustee, and therefore they're already got a slight hook, and therefore it's about advertising in other places where potential trustees won't already be looking. It's to get those people who haven't started the journey. So whether you put it elsewhere, but it will depend who you're looking for. That's what I'm saying is that you could do this broadcasting, but actually if there are particular skills and expertise, it's about trying to find places where those people are likely to pick it up. But it might be talking to your contacts in your organization about, are they on other networks that they could use and promote and send your advert out. But like I said at the beginning, there is no easy answer to this. It's about always trying something new and different things, even if they seem completely off the wall.
Yes, I think we've got to do it again, because we've got adverts out at Bournemouth University, AUB, we've got them on our LinkedIn, on our website, on our supporting organisation who we're a foundation of. I just yes, we have to have another brainstorm, really. I don't know where else we can go. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? No. All right, okay, well, we've finished 5 minutes early. Thank you very much. I hope it's given you a few tips. As I said, you'll get an email either today or on Monday when Chris is back in work. He's working this morning. It depends how long it takes to download the video, but look out for that. There'll also be a small evaluation form, and it'll be very helpful if you could fill that in to give us some feedback. And as I said, good luck with your recruitment. But as I said, you know, if you want some individual advice and support, then come back to me or Avril. Okay, well, thanks very much, and I will see you soon.
Thank you, Steve.
Very much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.